I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It started on a Thursday evening, the kind of Thursday that feels like it should have been Monday. I was at Hamza's house again, sitting on that same faded sofa that swallows you whole. The air scented faintly with cardamom tea. The metal gate squeaked when I pushed it open, a sound I'd learned to anticipate, like a prelude to something I didn't quite know. She was in the kitchen, of course, Aisha Ani, my friend's mom. She always smelled like clean laundry and something softer I couldn't name. I hadn't seen her in a few weeks, which felt like too long, though I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't even told myself. "Hey," she said, not looking up at first, just stirring the tea with the back of her hand. She set down the spoon and smiled, a small, half-remembering smile. The usual. I nodded because she somehow knew. I didn't even have to ask. It was ordinary. And yet, I caught myself watching the way her fingers held the cup, careful but relaxed, the slight crease at the corner of her eyes when she laughed softly at something Hamza said. A glance that felt like recognition, but maybe wasn't meant to. My eyes flicked toward her hands, unconsciously, as if tracking the movement of her life in those small gestures. I sat there, quietly, noticing things nobody notices. The pause before she answered when I joked, the way she folded the napkin on the counter with deliberate care, the faint hum of a song from her phone I couldn't place. And I realized I was alone in a way I hadn't admitted even to myself. Not painfully, just quietly. My thumb hovered over unsent texts, paused in midair as if the words would lose weight if I let them go. Hamza wasn't paying attention, which was fine. He never did. And then she laughed at something I didn't say, her eyes catching mine for a heartbeat too long. A simple acknowledgement, or something more. I couldn't tell, but my chest pinched anyway. "Want some more?" she asked, breaking a silence I hadn't realized I was holding. Her voice was soft, even when casual, and it made me aware of every quiet corner of the room. I shook my head, though I wanted to say yes. My hands rested on my knees, the way I always do when I don't know where to put them, fingers tapping the fabric of my jeans. She noticed, I thought, or maybe I imagined it. The conversation drifted to nothing in particular, Hamza's classes, the weather, the absurdity of traffic, and I let myself soak it in. Her presence was ordinary, but charged. Familiar, but distant. I realized I'd been measuring the moments between her words, the beats of her sentences, as if counting how long I could exist in her orbit without saying anything out of place. Then, just as I was thinking maybe it was time to leave, she handed me a folded slip of paper. Her fingers brushed mine, just for a second, too brief to mean anything, too intimate to forget. "Thought you might need this," she said, eyes a little too steady, voice a little too calm. I unfolded it, feeling the paper between my fingers like it had its own heartbeat. My name was written on it. Just that. No message. Nothing else. But it was enough. I looked up to say something, something polite, something casual, something that wouldn't give away the way my heart had stuttered. And she was already walking away, humming that unplaceable tune, leaving me holding a small, quiet secret. I didn't know then what it meant. I still don't. But I knew I would remember the weight of that paper, the flicker of her eyes, the warmth of the kitchen air, and the way everything ordinary had shifted in one tiny, unsent moment. The next evening, I found myself back at Hamza's, though I hadn't planned to. I told myself it was for the homework I had to drop off, but really it was for the quiet. The kitchen smelled like the same cardamom tea, a little warmer than yesterday, and the light from a single bulb above the counter caught the silver in her hair. "You're here early," she said, noticing me before I even spoke. Her voice carried that same softness, the one that made ordinary words feel deliberate. I shrugged, pretending casual, though my stomach tightened at the sound. "Needed something to do." She smiled, a little knowing, and set a cup of tea in front of me without asking. I accepted it, fingers brushing hers briefly on the rim. My chest tensed, then tried to settle into the warmth of the porcelain. "You know," she said, stirring her own tea slowly, "when I was your age, I used to sit in libraries for hours, just watching people. Not studying, just noticing." She laughed softly, not at me, but at the memory. I thought I'd learn everything about life that way. I said nothing because I wanted to hear more. I could feel the weight of her confession in the silence between sips, in the careful way her hand hovered over the cup before finally picking it up. I tried to imagine her at 20, the way she might have looked, laughing at her own awkwardness, oblivious to the way life would later shape her. The thought made my chest tighten. It was ridiculous. She was my friend's mom. She had a life I wasn't supposed to peek into. And yet I did. Every time I came here, I did. We washed the dishes together later. I handed her the plate, our fingers brushing. Not enough to matter, and yet enough to register in the quiet hum of the kitchen. I felt my heart tiptoe into something I didn't have a name for, a dangerous awareness. Divorced, older, my friend's mother. Every fact a soft warning bell I tried to ignore. The conversation drifted to small things. Groceries, a misplaced sock, Hamza's latest obsession with some game. I watched the way her shoulders relaxed when she talked about nothing. I imagined scenarios I'd never dare voice, and then chastised myself silently. Then, as we leaned over the counter, folding laundry together, she reached for a stray sock, and our hands collided. She didn't pull away. Her gaze lingered for a moment, soft, steady. I looked down, feeling the quiet tension in the air thicken. It was a small gesture, but the way her eyes met mine said something I wasn't supposed to hear. Acknowledgement, maybe curiosity, maybe just the quiet intimacy of two people noticing each other in a room full of mundane tasks. I didn't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. And when I left that night, the smell of cardamom still clinging to my jacket, the echo of her small laugh in my ears, I realized that ordinary evenings could hold more than ordinary meaning. I came over that Friday evening without thinking, or maybe thinking too much. Hamza was at a friend's place, so the apartment felt emptier than usual, though still warm with a faint smell of cardamom and laundry detergent. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a book open in front of her. The light caught her hair just right, a little silver at the temple, the rest dark, and I realized I'd been staring before I even noticed. "Hey," I said, voice low, trying casual. My hand brushed against the table as I sat down. She didn't look up immediately, just tapped the corner of her page, her finger lingering. "You've been quiet," she said finally. I shrugged because what else could I do? Quiet had become a habit, a way to measure myself around her without giving away too much. We made tea. I poured mine, tried not to spill. She handed me a cup without saying anything, and our fingers touched. Just a brush, nothing more. But I felt it like electricity underwater, a current I wasn't supposed to notice. I wanted to lean closer, to say something I couldn't, but a sudden thought made me pull back. Hamza, him noticing the awkward truth of being his friend and his mother's unofficial confidant. My chest tightened. We talked, sort of, about small things, the grocery delivery, Hamza's laundry, the weather shifting. But the air between us carried more than conversation. A glance too long, a laugh too soft, her hand resting near mine on the counter. Then she reached for the sugar, and our hands met again. I didn't move away this time. My pulse spiked, and I could tell, just from the tiniest shift of her eyes, that she noticed too. Something unspoken passed in that brief touch, and I froze, unsure if it was permission or a warning. The moment broke when the door creaked. Hamza had returned early. I jumped back slightly, a stutter in my words. She looked at me, eyes flickering, amusement, irritation. I couldn't tell. The tension didn't vanish, just shifted into a quiet undercurrent, thick enough to notice even with Hamza in the room. Later, after Hamza had disappeared upstairs, I lingered by the counter, pretending to clean. She leaned over to grab a dish. Our faces were close. My hand brushed hers. Our eyes locked for too long. I thought about what I could say, what I shouldn't. The space between us seemed to shrink, time folding in on itself. I wanted to move closer, wanted to feel that brush of warmth again. But she didn't move either. Not forward, not away. Just there, steady, quiet, like she was waiting for me to decide, though neither of us knew what that meant. A near kiss. A half-confession that stayed unspoken. I stepped back first. My hands lingered on the counter, shaking slightly. She picked up a tea towel, folding it slowly, carefully, as if to erase the invisible line we'd almost crossed. I left that night thinking about the way silence could carry a weight you didn't notice until it pressed against your chest, and about the tiny, almost imperceptible gestures that made ordinary evenings feel impossible. Monday came, and with it silence. I stopped by Hamza's around the usual time, the weight in my chest half expecting her to be there. But she wasn't. Not in the kitchen, not in the living room. Just Hamza, scrolling on his phone, oblivious. "Where's your mom?" I asked, trying casual. He shrugged, tossing the question back at me with a lazy grin. "Out." Said something about errands. I nodded, but my stomach sank. It wasn't the errands. I knew it wasn't. Something had shifted, though I couldn't put a finger on it. The next evening, I tried her number. Nothing. No answer. No vibration. No acknowledgement. I left a message anyway. My thumb hovered over the send button for what felt like forever, deleting, rewriting, deleting again. Finally, I didn't send it. I imagined her somewhere else, her day flowing along without me in the edges. I imagined her laughing, talking to someone who wasn't me, folding laundry with the same care I'd memorized. And the thought twisted my stomach in quiet knots. By Wednesday, I noticed the subtle changes when I came over anyway. The chair she always pulled out for me wasn't there. The kitchen smelled different, cleaner, maybe just unfamiliar. Her cup was gone, her presence replaced by absence. I remembered our small gestures, the touch of a hand, a glance too long, and the memory made me ache. But now, each recollection felt sharper, like it had been a rehearsal, and I had missed my cue. Hamza mentioned something about his mother's ex, a detail dropped casually, as if testing the waters. I stiffened. I shouldn't have let it matter, and yet it did. Her past, her life outside the apartment, it all felt suddenly too large, too complicated for me to touch. I tried imagining what I'd say if I saw her again. Would I confront her? Confess? Ask why she pulled back? But every scenario ended the same way. Words stuck halfway, swallowed by the quiet that had grown between us. Even the small things reminded me. The cup I didn't drink from, the seat I didn't take, the note I never left. I felt the gravity of everything unspoken pressing into me, and it was heavier than any argument or fight could have been. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. That evening, I stood by the gate for a while, pretending to check my phone. A few neighbors waved. The metal gate squeaked under my hand, and I almost called her name. Almost. Instead, I walked away, empty-handed, empty-hearted, carrying only the faint smell of cardamom that lingered like a question. The chair remained pulled in, the tea untouched, the world ordinary, but everything between us suspended, waiting. I found myself at Hamza's kitchen again, the evenings stretching thin with shadows and the hum of the fridge. She was there, already moving slowly, as if testing whether I had the courage to show up. "Hey," I said, voice quieter than I meant. She didn't answer right away, just looked at me, eyes steady, patient, like she'd been waiting for me to find the right words. I gripped the edge of the counter. My palms were slightly damp. I thought about walking away, about pretending none of it had happened, about letting the silence stretch indefinitely. But something inside me, maybe stubbornness, maybe longing, made me stay. I kept thinking about the last time. I said, finally. My voice cracked a little, though I tried to hide it. About that bench. About everything. I didn't know if I could. She stepped closer, just enough that I noticed the warmth of her presence without her touching me. "You don't have to say it," she murmured, voice soft, not demanding, just noticing. But I had to. I couldn't leave it unspoken. I keep imagining us, but I know I shouldn't. And still, I can't stop. My words trailed off, unfinished, raw, real. Her fingers rested briefly on the edge of the counter near mine. She didn't pull away. She didn't reach further. She just let it be, and somehow, letting it be was more than I expected. "I've wondered too," she admitted, voice quiet, careful, almost vulnerable. I didn't want to complicate things. For him. For me. For everything. We stood there in the kitchen, two people inches apart, surrounded by ordinary things, mugs, a kettle, a cutting board, everything mundane, everything grounding. And in that ordinary space, everything that had been unsaid between us weighed heavy. I could see the cost in her eyes, the restraint, the memory of choices, the quiet ache of responsibility. And I felt mine too, the cost of wanting, of staying, of risking being seen. I don't know what comes next, I whispered. Neither do I, she said. And for a moment, that was enough. She gave the faintest smile, a small upturn of lips that carried both acknowledgement and quiet surrender. I let my hand hover near hers, didn't move closer, didn't pull away. Just let be there. Finally, softly, she said, "Okay." And that was all. A single word, but in it, in the pause, in the quiet breath between us, it held more than any confession I could have made. It held the permission to exist in this fragile, impossible moment together without claiming, without demanding, without rushing. I breathed, and the tension in my chest loosened, just slightly. We didn't solve anything, didn't decide the future, didn't cross the lines we had drawn. But we had spoken, and sometimes that was enough. It was a Wednesday morning when I realized things had shifted. I walked up the familiar metal gate at 8:47 a.m., the hinge squeaking like it always did, and for a moment I expected nothing to be different. But the faint smell of cardamom greeted me before I even reached the door. And there she was, pouring black coffee into a chipped mug, hair tied loosely, eyes catching mine over the rim. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary, and ordinary had become extraordinary. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," I replied, smiling without thinking. The words felt easier this time, lighter. We sat at the kitchen table together. No tension, no unsaid words heavy between us. Just two people quietly sharing the start of the day. I watched her fingers trace the cup, the way they always did, and felt the familiar warmth settle in my chest. Hamza ran past, backpack bouncing, not noticing the small moment, and I didn't mind. This wasn't about him. It was about us. We walked later that evening to the bench outside the building, the same bench where everything had first become complicated. The sun was dipping low, brushing everything gold. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. She picked up a stray leaf, folded it between her fingers, and I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known I could feel. Tea later, then coffee, then tea again. Ordinary rituals that had somehow grown into our language. We knew the small cues, when to speak, when to pause, when a glance said everything. The weeks turned into months. She laughed more easily, and I noticed it, tucked it into memory. I learned the little shifts in her routine, the way she folded a napkin, the way she hummed a song I couldn't name. I found myself leaving notes sometimes, small things, unsent or folded into pockets, just for the sake of the ritual. One evening, after a long week, I stayed behind in the kitchen while she went to check Hamza's homework. I sipped my coffee slowly and caught the faintest smile curling at her lips when she returned. She didn't speak about what could have been or what might be. She just sat, ordinary, warm, present. And I realized that love didn't have to be loud. It didn't have to announce itself with gestures or declarations. It was in these small, quiet, earned moments. I reached over, lightly brushing her hand. She didn't flinch. She didn't grab mine either. Just let it rest there for a heartbeat. Enough. And I smiled because that was all the permission I needed. As we left the apartment later, the evening air carried the faint smell of tea, dust, and something warmer. Home. I thought about the first day I noticed her, the bench, the unsent texts, the paper she handed me, the near confessions, the pauses. It all led here, ordinary and miraculous all at once. And I knew one thing, quietly, for ourselves alone. Some things didn't need words. Some things just needed presence. Some mornings, when the coffee is just right and the sun slants through the window, I still catch her glance. And it says everything we learned without ever saying a thing. If this is for a video script, you could close with, engagement close. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?